Today's one, I believe we have 3 courses. And in between first and second course, we're going to be featuring a cocktail as well that's not on any of the things that you signed up for, but we just decided to add that in for our location. So we're going to do that in between first and second course. If there's any questions, if you need anything, please let us know. Kathleen's going to be taking care of you today. This is Sabrina. She's also going to be here with us today, and they're the MVP of the day. So we have sous chef Enki.
John. I know some of you guys. And please hold your applause. My chef, Adam Palfi.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We have some really tasty summer stuff today, so it should be a real treat. We got some really nice product for it, and that's kind of the theme of this menu today. Is just it's summer, and just like quality ingredients, just to make really simple stuff really good. So, without further ado, you should all have a little booklet in front of you. Okay? Was that a proper? I was like, no, chef. Well,
no, today's when you get to be the executive chef, so you can take as much revenge on me for all the things I do to your own service. So, have at chef.
Okay, so we will be starting with our kind of like a caprese, our version of a caprese salad with heirloom tomatoes. We have tricolor heirlooms, really just like soft, nice, ripe tomatoes. And for the cheese, we got a burrata cheese. It does say Burrata Mozzarella in there, in case that causes any confusion. Burrata is actually, it's a mozzarella cheese. What makes it, it's basically a shell of fresh mozzarella. Encased in the shell it's an even creamier buffalo mozzarella, kind of juiced up with more cream, basically. So it's like a creamy buffalo mozzarella encased in a shell of fresh mozz. And that being said, some of the preparations, as this normally occurs in our classes, we have booklets go out to all the stores with very specific instructions, preparations, and then we toss it all in the trash on the day. So we do have spots to take notes in the book, and if you're planning to do some of this stuff at home especially, we suggest that you do take some notes. For example, with the mozz, since I decided to get some really nice stuff, and with this recipe, it has you kind of, it has us first slice the tomatoes. So first I'm just going to take off a little bit. I forgot a paring knife. Sometimes it's best if you want to not waste any of the top like I just did, you can kind of pare out with a small sharp pointed knife that little bit of stem still in the top. For now, I'll just slice that out of the way.
The fruits and vegetables that you get here, they're all locally sourced?
Yes, most of our fruits and vegetables are locally sourced. We get from several different purveyors just for produce. And we try to do local as much as, as often as possible. And of course, the market allows us to fluctuate between that and some of our other purveyors, but we do receive our produce fresh every day. That's an order that's placed daily. And on occasion, we'll go out and shop, personally.
Yeah, there are a number of nice farmers markets around here. I know South Pass has one on Thursday. There's a farmers market at Victory Park by PHS every Saturday. So we try to utilize that as much as we can.
Good.
So I think it's listed as a 1/2 inch slice of tomato, and you can see they're nice, bright, big, fresh, ripe tomatoes. And the thickness on this, for this recipe was specific in that for the plating, it has us stack everything first, and then slice it all in half lengthwise, and then take those slices, as well as the cheese, sliced basically the same way. And then we're supposed to kind of stand them up on their side. And that can be done with the tomatoes. But since we got the really good stuff, I mean, this stuff's so creamy that it might kind of fall apart on the plate, so I couldn't think of a way to stand everything up without the mozz kind of being hidden between those walls of tomato. So instead, we're going to try something a little different. And it's really, and when you're doing things at home especially, it's little finishing touches that kind of make these things, presentation, things in squeeze bottles, making little dots, like that's what makes it, special and good looking. But most importantly, it's in the ingredients. So I'm just going to place a couple tomatoes down. Actually, let's talk a bit more about the mozz. I actually had the pleasure of, in culinary school, I had an externship, and I went to Italy for 10 weeks in the Amalfi Coast. And somewhere down there in a town called Battipaglia, they make fresh buffalo mozzarella on a farm. So I went to this farm, they took me out there. You could see the buffalo out in the grass. They just looked real happy. It was a joyous sight. They had these huge 5-gallon drums, and they were setting fire bales of hay inside the drums to smoke the buffalo mozzarella. And inside there was this guy. He was maybe 100 years old, just shirtless, just stretching this mozz inside a hot vat. It looked like he'd been doing it all his life. And it's this technique that they use where you kind of stretch the curds inside this hot thing. You know, it's all separated out, and there's a little bit more to the process, obviously. But I got to taste some of that fresh buffalo mozz from the source, and it's by far just the most delicious thing maybe I've ever had. So, and this is not too far from it. What we have here. Let me move some of this stuff out of the way. I think also you can see some other ingredients in this plate. There's only a few ingredients. There's a Fig Balsamic reduction. And we're gonna talk about that a little bit. I'm not gonna have you watch it pop boil for an hour or so. But for that we have black mission figs. We have a dried version of that, and we suggest kind of hydrating, just like in the the sun-dried tomato pesto. We rehydrate the dried stuff so that it doesn't kind of suck in and take in all the other moisture of the things you're adding inside there, like the oils and vinegars and other flavorings. So we've just kind of sliced. You can even rough chop the figs because it's all going in a pot to be cooked down, blended, and then strained through a fine sieve.
And it's important when you rehydrate, you're going to rehydrate in warm water. If not, it's really not going to soften up like you would want it to. Otherwise, you're going to have a chewy, textural kind of feel in your mouth, which isn't very pleasant. So whenever you rehydrate anything, whether it's sun-dried tomatoes or chili peppers or anything like that, you want to use warm water. It doesn't need to be boiling, it just needs to be warm.
Would be just enough water to fully cover it?
Correct.
And do you use the water after?
You can, depending on what you're going to use, especially if you're making like, we like to use chile de árbol when we do pan noodles and stuff like that to make either an enchilada sauce or a salsa. We'll incorporate that water back into it so we can get more flavor out of it.
And do you, how long do you do the rehydration? 5 minutes? Or?
5-10 minutes. Just long enough for it to soften up.
Same way you hydrate, say, with a dried shiitake mushroom. If you have almost steeping water, put it in a bowl and cover it, 5-10 minutes would fully rehydrate it. So with the Fig Balsamic, it's simply the figs thrown into a pot with brown sugar and Dark Balsamic. And you have these ingredients listed out, measured out specifically. Cook it down, blend it, and strain it through a fine sieve. And then you have something that's nice and kind of tight, and you can kind of streak on a plate or drizzle on top.
If you guys can't find dried figs, you can use fresh figs.
And then just kind of skip the hydrating process if you have fresh. Okay, so let's go ahead and make the sun-dried tomato pesto. We have a few different things for that. You should have all those ingredients listed as well. Sun-dried tomato, those have been soaked. We have some toasted macadamia nuts, fresh garlic cloves, fresh picked Thai basil. We tend to use Thai basil as opposed to sweet fresh basil, just it has a little more of a kick to it.
And we're formerly known as Asian fusion, so we've got to incorporate it a little bit, right?
That's how we made that Asian. The pesto is now Asian with Thai basil. You're welcome. Okay. I've got fresh squeezed lemon juice, and I have some extra virgin olive oil. We use a lot of our oil for cooking, for dressings. We use mostly soybean oil, and extra virgin we bust out for finishing products. You know, if we're making a vinaigrette, we can use extra virgin. If we're, even on this dish, if we didn't have the pesto on the bottom, I might suggest drizzling olive oil on top. But we kind of have all those elements covered in other areas with these other recipes.
Why soybean oil?
soybean oil is just kind of the vegetable oil that we use.
It's a neutral oil, it doesn't have any kind of flavor, it has a high smoking point, so you can cook with it, do a lot of different things with it, you can fry with it. You can definitely cook with olive oil, there's nothing wrong with that. I do suggest you kind of steer away from olive oil when it comes to making a dressing, because when you're making a dressing, you're going to use a good amount of olive oil or oil to make that dressing, and olive oil can become overpowering and kind of bitter, your dressing. Ideally, I would use like a grapeseed oil or some sort of neutral flavored oil. That way, whatever flavor you're looking for doesn't get overpowered or taken with the olive oil.
So if you have something like a RoboCoupe, would a blender work for this, Chef?
A blender would work for that, or any food processor. With this recipe, they're looking for more of a rustic kind of chunkier style pesto. With a blender, you're going to get something substantially smoother.
So inside here, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And usually with a food processor, the motor is going to be a little stronger. And with a blender, you could potentially burn out your motor. And we all know if you have a good blender, you don't want to waste it because those things can be quite expensive.
Excuse me, with a Vitamix, you're gonna burn out the blender?
Oh, well, no, Vitamix is a totally separate story. Vitamix, I have one at home too. Those are phenomenal. They're great. You can do just about anything with those. They're also $500. So, but Vitamix, no, you'll be fine with that. But I will say, like, you know, some of the more like a Hamilton Beach or the KitchenAid kind of blenders, those blender motors really aren't the strongest. So you could potentially burn those out. I know because I did that until I bought a Vitamix, so I learned the hard way.
Okay, so everything listed for the sun-dried tomato pesto is inside the food processor besides the oil. And we're going to make an emulsification. Kind of the same process for a vinaigrette. Put everything in there, we're going to blend up and get it smooth and incorporated. You may need to pulse, you may need to get in there with a spatula. Move it around a little bit, and this is kind of it's a rustic, robust recipe. It's not going to be perfectly smooth. It's meant to look rustic, and the color of it and the flavor of it obviously is what we're going for, but it will add a little texture to the dish as well. Sticking to the sides a little bit.
Those right there are about $1,200.
I'm going to actually take a little bit of my hydrating tomato liquid to loosen this up, to bring it together a little more, and to get it off the walls in here, if you'd like to take note. Okay, it's starting to come together here. Just about all incorporated. It's a little chunky, but we're going to start to add our olive oil slowly, just kind of drizzle it into the vortex of this mixture. And this will further take it off the walls, bring it together.
It's very important that you drizzle in your oil or whatever fat you're going to use. If you add it all at once, it's not going to fully incorporate, and the vinaigrette or the pesto in this case is going to break and separate, and you're not going to enjoy that.
And keep that, the hydrating liquid close by. If it starts to look a little too oily, greasy, add a couple drops of the water and it will bring it back together. For the most part, anything's better than water flavor-wise, but because we hydrated the tomato, it'll have a little flavor to it. Yes? Yes, so this is the olive oil, just the olive oil going in now. The last ingredient that we left out. I'm sorry? Oh, well, I brought up soybean oil because that's what we use 90% of the time in a lot of our cooking. But when we're making something like a pesto or a vinaigrette, we use a finishing oil such as olive oil, of course. Okay.
I didn't see anything.
I got it.
I didn't see anything.
Slowly but surely, it's coming together. It's getting a little more creamier looking. It's loosened up a little bit. All right. Everything's in there. And actually, another big difference between this and a Vitamix to me, the blender, is this thing's powerful, but it doesn't heat up. A Vitamix blender it'll start to heat up and it'll actually start cooking what's in there. Sometimes we even utilize that for a recipe. But especially when we're doing something bright green, maybe you'll find ice cubes in that recipe just to keep it cool inside the blender. But you don't have that to worry about in something like this. All right, so I'm just gonna pop that out and we'll set that aside. I think all we're missing is our grilled fennel. I have a whole fennel bulb here with all the fronds attached. I'm just gonna trim off pretty much everything. You can leave a little stem on. And we thought with the amount of equipment in here, we don't need to pull the grill in here with us.
I don't think the fire department would like that either.
No, they haven't liked it in the past. So we're just gonna kind of do a slice of this lengthwise. And here's another take note section where in your recipe it's listed as about a ½ an inch, I believe, that we're slicing them. Is that what it says? And then we're gonna grill them like that, and they're kind of laid out in layers. And to me, I found it to be, it's a little too much. Like that's more than one bite to me. So we decided to grill them, roast them on the grill. And once they come off the grill, I have those somewhere. See my pen up there? Okay. All right, so it's been roasted on the grill. If they're cut really thick, you might want to put some grill marks on it, go into the oven for a little bit. So I took it off the grill, and then I just kind of did a julienne cut. We sliced it up a bit more. So we're going off recipe now. And we have smaller pieces of it, it's more bite-sized, there's not so much, that strong kind of licorice flavor. The grilling, it does sweeten it up and mild it out a little bit, but we just thought it would be best to chop it up a little bit before it goes down. Okay, so I've got a couple of that, a couple of slices here, reserved. Okay, and we're going to start plating that. Are there any other questions on this course so far?
Where do you find that cheese at?
Burrata, good question. So,
I would say probably a Whole Foods or Bristol Farms or Gelson's. Bond, Ralph's Pavilions might carry it. I haven't seen it there, but it's very possible. It's usually going to be a little more expensive and a little more of one of those fine delicatessen style cheeses, so I'd search there first.
right, we
Excuse
went.
me, you mentioned about grilling the fennel. It's not identified here. I mean, what technique do you use? You slice it and you just a little oil, or how do you do that?
Really? Did we not mention the grilling of the fennel?
I'm missing it. Does anybody else see it in here?
It just says grill.
Grilled fennel, okay. All right, I do apologize for that. Okay.
Yeah, you would slice it thin, or you would slice it a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt, and then grill it.
For how
Or
long?
like
How
5
long do you
minutes
grill it
or-
for?
Depending on the heat of your grill, on like a medium-high heat, I'd probably say about 5 minutes at most.
So just until tender?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And as I mentioned, if you got thicker slices of it, you can put the nice grill marks on it, and also throw it into a 350-degree oven to continue roasting inside the oven. Yes, but once it's pork tender, basically, is what you're looking for. And we cool down to about room temperature. It doesn't have to be ice cold. Shouldn't be too hot when you're layering it with the tomatoes. 5 minutes. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to take a spoonful of my pesto, drop an ounce on the plate towards the back, and then just swoosh it down the front. And see, we've got that nice color from the tomato. It's a little different. Yeah, we've done a lot of different versions of a pesto. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just make stacks. I didn't get the cheese cut. So this cheese is so soft that I found a knife was kind of useless. So I've just got a large spoon, even a butter knife, you can just kind of cut into it. But I'm just going to cut out little dollops of it, cut through the skin of it, and you'll see it coming out as we speak. As it is assembled, you shall be served. Okay, so I get a layer. Okay, yeah.
Sometimes do you put the mozzarella in the freezer to get it a little stiffer so you
That's
can
a good
slice
idea.
it?
Yes.
I'm kind of wishing I did that here. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, ice cold tomatoes and cheese would be
Yeah.
really nice anyway. Perfect, yeah.
Stick it.
You just want to make sure you don't actually freeze it.
Right, just get it hard for 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, and when you freeze it, there's going to be water crystallization,
Right.
which will kind of dull out the flavor of that burrata or any kind of cheese.
Okay, so I've just kind of, excluding the fennel for now since we decided to slice it up, I've layered the tomatoes and the cheese, just alternating, you know, keeping in mind just a straight line, following the plate basically, the shape of the plate. Okay? I'm going to take my fennel and just put a little bit on there instead of basically a whole bowl. We're just going to do a few slices. I think it suggests kosher salt. We're going to up the game and do a little smoked, I'm sorry, not smoked, this is Hawaiian sea salt. We're putting across the tomatoes and the cheese. This is something that's like, it's so nice and simple and delicious, but if you forget the salt, you're forgetting to bring the flavor out of it.
Yeah, we would recommend some sort of sea salt or gray salt, fleur salt, things like that. It has a really clean sodium flavor, and what's nice about those kind of salts is they have texture to them. They'll have some crunch to it, which this is a very tasty dish. The only thing I wish it had would be some sort of textural component to it. Whether it be croutons or some crushed up pita chips or something like that, just to add some texture to the dish. That's something you guys can go home and experiment with, and that's one of the great things about cooking and watching these kind of demonstrations. We'll show you the basics, and that way you can take what you've learned here and then expand to it to meet the needs of what you and your friends and family may like.
What if you let the fennel raw? Wouldn't that be crunchy?
You could do that. Absolutely. You could slice it super thin, put it in an ice bath to get it even crispier, and then place it on there. That'd be some nice texture too.
Okay, some of you can see what we've done. We've gone off the menu again with the balsamic. You're welcome to drizzle, or if you have a squeeze bottle, this is nice. It's viscous enough to where you can just drop little drops of your balsamic, and you have that really nice contrast of the dark color of that against the pesto and the tomatoes. And
I want to touch the balsamic a little bit too. So when you guys are making this and it's reducing and it's thickening because of the sugar, in the pot as it's hot, if it's pretty thick in there, as it cools, it's almost gonna solidify. And then you're gonna be sitting there with a squeeze bottle trying to pour it out and it's barely gonna come out. If that does happen, you can add a little bit of water to it to kind of loosen it up. Because there's so much sugar and acid in there, it's not gonna dilute the flavor as much as you would think.
Now, is this onion or garlic, the white little slices?
That is fennel.
That's the fennel.
That is what
That's
Our mimosas here. So it's pretty simple. If you're interested in the measurements, as far as the peach schnapps go, it's pretty sweet, so it's kind of to your liking, but we would recommend just 1/4 of an ounce. If you like sweeter, then maybe do 1/2 ounce. And then after that, you would just add about 1/2 ounce of guava, whether you use the guava juice or guava puree. And then you're gonna just top it off with the Prosecco. So You don't really need a lot, and again, it's like up to your preference as far as if you like sweet or not. I prefer more champagne than the juice, so.
I know. At home, I put my,
So to recap, it is peach schnapps.
Peach schnapps, you can use Prosecco,
And guava
guava,
juice.
yeah, guava juice, guava puree, whichever you prefer.
Those three ingredients, basically.
Yes, and orange juice.
Oh, and some orange
Yeah,
juice.
and some orange juice.
Okay.
This way.
The first course at any time, if there's any other questions throughout. Our pan-seared Atlantic salmon. We get fresh Atlantic salmon. You can get fish whole, you can get it pre-filleted. We suggest fresh as opposed to frozen. We do not use frozen fish, and it's just the quality obviously will come through. And when you're doing something like pan-searing or grilling, especially, it just kind of makes all the difference. You know, marinate a nice piece of fish that's fresh, put it on the grill. If you have something that's frozen and get defrosted, it's going to hold all that water, and it's going to ruin the texture, and it's going to leach out the flavor and whatnot. So we highly suggest a fresh fish.
yeah, is it farmed or wild?
This is farm. This is, I think, the only thing we get farm raised.
This is the only thing we get farm raised. Yes, correct.
And you can find, I think Asian markets are pretty good for some fresh fish. I like Seafood City. I've been there for, you can get whole fish, break it down yourself. There's other Asian markets that exist that, have pre-filleted, you basically, if you want to save some money, buy it not fully broken down, you can practice your knife guts. Yeah?
Yeah, no,
Good.
Costco also has some really nice fish and meats as well too. I love shopping at Costco. The problem is you tend to buy in bulk, so if you're just shopping for yourself and your husband or your wife, might not be as good for that, but fantastic products. One thing I want to note, actually there's a couple things I want to talk about real quick before John gets into this. So in your packet, it's going to say a yuzu goat cheese vinaigrette. Now, when I first read this packet, I assumed that the goat cheese would be in the vinaigrette. It is not. So that little part right there can be a little misleading. There is goat cheese on the plate, but it's not in the vinaigrette itself.
That'll be one of our finishing components. Is to dollop some fresh chef goat cheese on the plate.
Also, on the second page, when it talks about the ingredients in the vinaigrette, it's going to talk about xanthan gum. Now, xanthan gum is something that most of you will have either not heard of and will probably not have in your cupboard at home. Xanthan gum is a thickener. It is also an emulsifier. It does not have any kind of flavor component to it. It's completely safe. It's just a natural texturizer that comes from seaweed and things like that. So when you guys are making your vinaigrette at home, since you don't have the xanthan gum, I would just continue to add a little bit more oil to it to help with that emulsification process. If you can find it, I recommend having it. It's a great little tool to kind of help cheat when it comes to making vinaigrettes and stuff like that. So when you have this, you won't have to add as much oil to emulsify your product, and it is a natural gluten-free thickener. You can add it to soups, stocks, things like that, and you can make your product gluten-free. And a little bit goes a long way when it comes to stuff like that.
Where would you buy that?
I haven't seen it in any specialty store, whether it's Whole Foods or Bristol Farms. You can find it
I bet you could get it online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where is it on my book?
Thank you, Chef.
Yeah.
So we're going to take our salmon. We have a 6-ounce portion today, which is a larger portion than we normally do for lunch. I have kosher salt. I'm going to evenly season both sides of the fish with salt and fresh cracked pepper. I'm kind of way up here. It's just you get more even distribution instead of clumps in a concentrated area on the protein.
A lot of times when we're cooking, especially fish like this, we will not use black pepper, only because it looks kind of like black specks of dirt on your fish or whatever white protein may be. Now, I do prefer black pepper in terms of taste over white pepper and things like that, but white pepper will still give you that kind of peppery finish without having those black specks. So you have that beautiful, clean, photo style presentation that you guys see on all the fronts of your packets.
For the fish, is it preferred without the skin in this case?
In this case, yes.
For this
So
recipe.
I love skin on fish. I enjoy that flavor. I enjoy that crisp texture to it. The one thing about that, if you're going to cook with skin on, you are going to kind of have to get a little brave and press it with your hand. So you got to get in there with that hot oil and stuff like that. Otherwise, the skin will kind of curl, and parts of it won't crisp up. The outside will, but the interior center won't. You'll kind of have this flaccid, kind of chewy-ish kind of skin texture to it. And always when you're cooking with skin on, you want to make sure it's scaled. So
Yeah.
you'd be surprised how many people that, you know, it's common sense to them, but you have to kind of make sure that you explain that. Don't forget that part.
Okay, I've got a smoking hot non-stick pan here. A non-stick pan is not required, especially if it's smoking hot, and especially if you're using, if the oil's hot, and I like to add a touch of butter as well, just for browning, especially if you decide to leave the skin on. You want a little butter in there. It's recommended anyway, just for some color and crispiness.
This is the soybean oil?
So this is soybean oil we're cooking with now, exactly, and can easily be replaced with canola or vegetable, any other kind of vegetable oil. We don't recommend something like the olive oil, which will scorch much quickly, much more quicker.
Can we find soybean oil easily at regular markets, or do we have to buy it at
That's a good question. I think in regular markets, soybean oil you'll find mostly in a spray can. You can certainly find it at an Asian market.
No, they've got it in bottles.
Do they have it in
Oh,
bottles
yeah.
at the
Oh, yeah.
Ralph's? Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Thank you. I've not noticed that.
We probably don't go grocery shopping.
Oh, yeah, just see here. We just, yeah. Okay. All right, so I got my hot oil in the pan. I'm gonna add a little pat of butter. Almost to the smoky point. We want this to be nice and hot.
And if you're gonna cook with butter like John's doing right now, you wanna make sure you get your oil in first, that hot. That way when you add the butter, it won't burn.
Okay, so we've got the salmon we just carefully laid down. What would have been the skin side up, so kind of your presentation side down first. We're gonna let that go a couple minutes here, just on one side. It'll come down a little bit on the heat, since we do have butter in the pan.
If you guys are not gonna use a non-stick pan at home, if you're doing something like this is the part where it's gonna require patience. Don't touch it, don't move it, let it be, allow that protein to crisp up and to form that sear. If you try too quickly to move it, it's gonna tear and it's gonna fall apart, and you're not gonna have that beautiful, nice golden exterior on it. I know it's hard sometimes, because you're like, oh, it's gonna burn, it's gonna burn. Just follow the instructions and just be patient.
Yeah, just like the same thing with meat and another protein.
Flesh of that fruit.
Let's check on the salmon. Can I touch it now? You're pretty adamant
You
about
should
it.
do no hands in a flip.
Just no hands on it. So actually, you know, the butter's getting a little dark, so I'm actually going to just pour out a little bit of the cooking fat. I've got a nice fish spatula here ready to go. And I'll do you one of these. That's a good one. Okay. All right.
How
See,
did
we.
he know it was 80% done?
Through many, many years of cooking.
Well, you can see before change color, halfway up, you're halfway there. So at this point, I mean, if we want a mid-rare plus medium fish, I'm going to turn it down and turn it off here in a minute. And then, just like a piece of meat, we're going to let it rest for a couple minutes just to kind of retain its juice and, you know, kind of carry over cooking. It'll cook even out of the pan for another minute or two. I don't eat peaches too often. I decided to cut it like this. How do people do peaches to get them around? I'm bringing a knife around kind of sushi style. If you have a sharp knife and you're confident with it. Okay, so we did that. You can, you know, peel out the fork. We're going to turn this off and carry it over right there. And I think it says we're cutting these into 16ths. So we've cut it in half, half again. There's our 8ths, and 16ths will give you some pretty small slivers. So it's kind of your preference. You know, there's an 8th right there. And that might also depend on, you know, how ripe your peaches are. If you have super ripe, they're a little softer than you planned for, you might not want to get it any skinnier than that because it'll fall apart on the grill. As we decided not to do any grilling in here today, you can imagine this going onto a grill, you know, rotating it slightly and getting some patch marks or, you know, just cross marks. You want to just kind of bring out some of the natural sweetness. You're caramelizing on the grill basically by putting grill marks on it. It will soften it and it'll sweeten it up too.
Now with this, you don't have to boil the peach itself. I would just recommend that you season your grill. What I mean by seasoning is put a little bit of oil on the grill grates itself. That way it doesn't stick. And again, it's one of those things you have to be patient and allow the caramelization to occur. If you're too impatient with it, you're going to try to pick it with a spatula and it's going to fall apart. Now, there's also another indicator with your salmon to find out where it's medium and when it's going to start to get there. If you ever cook salmon at home and if you've overcooked it, you'll start to see a white substance kind of come out the sides. So at that point, it's medium and above. So it's a nice little indicator. If you guys aren't familiar with the touch method in terms of temping, that's one way you could do it. You guys could always use a thermometer. As chefs, we do not use thermometers. We definitely don't have the time to sit there with a thermometer and temp everything. So by those little indicators visually and in terms of touch are nice ways to kind of expedite the process when you guys are cooking at home.
Thank you, Chef. Okay, we're moving on to the pan set for this course. We have just some nice baby summer squashes. We have some peeled baby carrots that have been blanched slightly in heavily salted boiling water, shocked and nice, and then we got nice little knife cuts out of them. If you slice them as thin as we did, you could probably skip the blanching process. If you slice them like this raw, I'm pretty sure you'll be cooked through by the time you're done in this pan, as we'll be glazing the vegetables as well, meaning we're going to be adding a little bit of chicken stock, reducing it slightly so that will cook through as well, and then we'll finish with a little bit of butter.
Now in your recipe, it talks about Vadavan carrots. So Vadavan carrots are not a type of carrot. Vadavan is a seasoning or a spice. It is a handmade curry blend. It is really, really nice, really flavorful, extremely expensive. It's about $64 a pound. Yeah, very expensive, but it has great, great flavor. So when you guys read that, I just wanted you guys to be aware what Vadavan actually is.
Okay, so I've got my pan smoking hot here. I'm going to add a little bit of oil carefully. Saute 101, don't put stuff you're sauteing in a cold pan. Let the oil get hot. And this, I just like to get the pan hot first. So then by the time I'm there with the oil, I don't risk walking away and the oil scorching and setting on fire. So it's smoking hot now. I've got some baby patty pan squash going in. And we decided to do these raw. The squash are a little softer and they did not require blanching. Does it say garlic? I forgot garlic in here. You might want garlic. We usually saute with a little bit of chopped garlic and fresh ginger.
No, it doesn't say garlic.
It's not. Okay.
Squash and carrots or what?
So this is the squash, a bias cut, kind of a diagonal cut of baby zucchini, as well as the asparagus bias cut. And And those techniques, I believe they're described in your packet. So we're just browning the vegetables a little bit in here. I'm going to add in my carrots last since they've already blanched for a minute. Okay. We'll season with a little bit of salt and pepper, with in mind that we want to finish this possibly with further seasoning. We can always adjust the seasoning when we're done. You know, careful how heavily you season.
You always want to make sure that when you're cooking, you want to season in layers. You don't want to have no seasoning whatsoever and then try to season at the very end. You want to slowly build those flavors and then season to whatever your palate desires.
Okay, so when you start getting a little color on the veg, they're still kind of pretty al dente here. They all have a crunch to them. We're going to add a little bit of chicken stock. You're welcome to substitute that with vegetable stock or even a fish stock for this recipe would kind of make sense. Or, you know, try not to use water, as that will not add any flavor. But, you know, if you want sauteed vegetables, you don't feel like putting a bunch of butter in, we understand that as well. It's okay. We tend to, flavor comes first for everything we do here. And that's part of what the class is about, you know. Quality of ingredients, presentation, but flavor first, you know.
Yeah, all the healthy stuff we kind of throw out the window. Like when you come to a restaurant like this, it's an experience. You guys don't come here very often, but when you do, we want you to make sure that you get the full experience of the service, the food, and the flavor. So,
all right. So, Kathleen, do you know if they started this course in there?
I will check right now.
Thank you. So at this point, the chicken stock's been almost fully reduced. I'm going to turn off the heat and add our butter last thing. So without risking the butter breaking, separating, becoming oily, we're literally going to glaze it inside. The last thing we're doing is glazing the vegetables with butter.
So the technical culinary term for what John's doing right now, he'd be mounting with butter.
Mounting with butter. So everything, you've got the color from the sear, and now it's all glazed over with butter. Ah, there's the light. The light's interesting. Okay. Smell kind of good. Thank you.
And it's very important that when you guys are glazing and mounting with butter, you want the heat on. If you have the heat on, you have a greater likelihood of having that butter break and separate and have the really, really oily and greasy gravy.
Okay. At this point, I think we have everything we need prepared here to start plating.
We're kind of going past the vinaigrette because it's a very simple process. The one thing I do want to touch on is yuzu. Yuzu you can find in Japanese markets. I also believe you can find it at Williams-Sonoma. It is not cheap. You can get a 16.9 ounce bottle for about $20 a piece, and that's our restaurant cost. I can only imagine what Williams-Sonoma is going to charge for something like that. If you guys can't find it,
What is yuzu?
Who does it?
Amazon, I got it off.
Oh, on Amazon. When in doubt, yeah.
What is yuzu?
yuzu is a Japanese citrus. It's kind of like a combination between lemon and lime. So if you guys can't find it, I would substitute equal parts lemon and lime juice, and that'll give you the closest flavor to yuzu without actually having it itself.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've got a small round plate we're going to use here for this. I think it's suggested in your final plate presentation to go around 11 o'clock on the plate. You're going to place a couple pieces of the zucchini, and that's going to act as just a little bit of a lift for the salmon. Oh man, thank you, Chef.
Yeah,
working with tweezers. Favorite.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I thought I was sure tweezers when I first got back, and I don't think they're even out of the wrapper yet.
And that's very good. It's too small for the baby squash. Okay. So, all right, we're gonna arrange the vegetables just kind of evenly now, showing off any, sear marks that we got. Just, take a second and make it special, We try to do it with every plate that we serve every night, every day.
So do you periodically cook up a dish and several of you will sit around and try it and talk about
Absolutely.
whether it's accomplishing what you want it to accomplish?
Yeah. Yes.
Every time we come in with a chef special, which changes once a month, we do sit down, we taste everything. Once the taste profile is correct, and that's what we're looking for, then we begin the plating process on how we want it to look on the plate. Whether we want to stack it, keep it nice and tight, or we kind of want to have a deconstructed look to it. So there is a process to everything that we do. And even without a chef creation, we taste everything. Even I've been working with Royce for almost 8 years. John's been working for Royce for over 10 years now. We still taste mash. The same mashed potatoes that we've been making day in and day out every day, we still taste to make sure that it's up to par where it needs to be.
Do you ever need volunteers?
We do.
Daily.
We do. Eating all that butter and stuff, it starts adding on. My wife likes to remind me of all the mash that I do on a daily basis. So.
Okay, so you see I've just arranged the vegetables around, take a second and, kind of make it aesthetically to your liking. The yuzu emulsion we've got in a small squeeze bottle with a narrow tip. And we're going to do a couple more dots. And this stands up off the plate a little bit. It's been thickened to where we can do that.
It's not going to stand up off the plate like we have here. The reason it's doing that is because of the xanthan gum. It's a stabilizer and a thickener, and it's going to allow it to kind of sit up and off the plates.
So that's our secret, is additives that we purchase from who knows where. And at the end of every class, it's always like Amazon. It's like, okay, just like check it out. It's probably a better deal anyway. And you're welcome to drizzle this right on the salmon. Again, if you're making this at home, make it the way you want it and the way you want to serve it to your family. I think all we're missing here is I've got some of our fresh goat's milk cheese. I'm just gonna drop a few pats of that around.
Now, one thing you can do instead of having big chunks like that, and you really can't chop up goat cheese, if you guys ever have those wire baking racks, like small little squares, what you can do is you can grate it into that, and it'll be really easy for you to kind of crumble and decorate the plate.
And a finishing touch, we've got some micro arugula. We're just gonna drop a few pieces of the microgreens around.
Tweezers.
Yeah,
He doesn't want
I
them.
gotta
He
admit.
doesn't want them. I took them back. No, hey, chef, this is your class today.
Is the grilled peach in there?
The grilled peach, I did sneak in the grilled peach, yes. Okay, so, and I apologize for how far away this is from everyone. Thank you. Yeah, for me, aesthetically, we like things, chef likes things tight and centered and, kind of symmetrically pleasing, which isn't too difficult to wrap your head around.
Now the micros that John used are really, really nice. They do have a lot of great flavor to them. They don't last very long.
Similar.
I want to say there's maybe a 3 to 4 day shelf life on that, and that's if you keep it sealed and in the refrigerator consistently. If you leave it out for an extended period of time, they're going to wilt, they're going to die, and they're pretty expensive. So we get a 4-ounce clamshell, and that's going to run about $14 to $15 for each little clamshell that comes in. So.
Did I forget? The Vondavon carrot is in there, yes. So what we did was, that's a good question because, thank you. The question is that I use the Vondavon carrot. And the carrots that I have here, they've already been seasoned with Vondavon. I didn't mention that before, so thank you. So I put them all in the same pan. In the kitchen right now, they've taken the carrots and sauteed them in a separate pan and added an infused Vondavon curry oil. So we actually use our sous vide machine for that, where we cryovac an airtight bag full of something like olive oil, or a flavoring oil, and we put our curry in there and we cook it underwater at a controlled temperature and basically infuse the oil with that flavor. The same way you can, naturally, instead of aging it for several weeks on a shelf, we put it under a controlled water bath for a couple of hours. And we have this nice strong flavor of that oil. So that curry oil went into the carrots beforehand, and then we put it all in the same pan.
So how do we do that
At home?
So what I would recommend you guys do is you can either take that curry spice and add it at the end to season it, or what you can do is you can take that spice and take a neutral flavored oil and blend it. And blend it for, I'd say, 4 or 5 minutes until that blender and that liquid starts to get hot. That way that curry spice infuses into that oil, and then you can use that as you're sauteing.
And that's how we actually use the heat from the Vitamix blender. There's a recipe we have for scallion oil, I think. Remember that one?
Correct.
You get that bright green scallion, but it requires you to kind of cook it in the blender for about 5 minutes. Is it? We have a ginger liqueur, maple syrup, a little bit of cinnamon, a little more of that dark balsamic that we've reserved from our first course. So I'm just going to put those liquids. I'm going to put a little zest of fresh orange, syrup, and all these amounts of course are to scale about 4 servings most likely in the packet. No, I don't need that. Okay. And actually, while we get this going, since we're not grilling and we don't need to allow too much time for that, I've got a hot waffle iron back here. It's a very simple, no frills waffle recipe. The batter, flour, milk, eggs, there's a little baking powder in there, among a couple other ingredients. So we've got this hot, ready to go. We're just going to spray it to ensure that we don't stick to it, both sides.
So we actually just bought this yesterday specifically for this class, and I was amazed on how expensive these things really are. So looking at this, how much do you think something like this would cost? Just guess.
$300.
That's good. It was $385 per ounce.
Wow.
Yeah.
What brand is it?
It's a wearing waffle iron. It does a great job. But $400 for a waffle iron is crazy.
How much is it? I didn't hear.
Sorry?
How much was it?
$380.
That's crazy. So why'd you flip it so quickly? Oh, that's got it, okay.
Once you go buy this, I bought this at a restaurant, give me $50. I would assume maybe $100 for like an industrial kind of retail, something like that. $300. Blew my mind. Blew my mind. And we will not use this for the rest of the year.
Alright folks, so inside, just inside a mixing bowl of any sort, we've got those liquids for the peaches. I've got the peaches sliced. I think this one actually calls for 8 slices as opposed to 16s. Maybe because it's taking on a marinade and soaking it up, there'll be more chance they'll soften, fall apart on us.
I bought that at Restaurant Depot.
Okay, so I've got these glazed. Through the magic of television, I've gone ahead and I've grilled the peaches ahead of time. We're going to reserve a little bit of that marinating liquid from the peaches for our final presentation, so we'll set that aside. We're going to talk about the candied ginger in this recipe next. We've got fresh ginger root, acquired cheaply. I'm pretty sure you can get that at Ralph's now.
Yeah.
Great, okay. So easily acquired, rarely expensive. I think this is good. This beeps when it's ready to flip. Let me know if somehow I missed them. I like to, you're welcome to use a peeler. I find a spoon, just scrape with a teaspoon, the skin comes right off. Unless you have a pretty magical peeler, this is actually easier. Scraping it off. For the sake of time, I'm going to discard a couple of little nubs sticking out of the side. Okay, so I've got it scraped. We're just going to cut it down. We're flipped. Wait, is that it? We're still learning how to use the waffle iron, okay? So if you want to spend the 350, it's very easy to use how to learn. It only takes about one cooking class to figure out how to use it. Okay, crispy golden, and that's like, because this is a powerful machine, that was like a medium setting, and it takes about, I don't think that was even 5 minutes. So, voila.
Apparently this machine can make up to 25 waffles in an hour.
Wow.
All right, so the ginger, I'm just going to take a fully peeled piece here. If you have a sharp enough vegetable mandolin, and you have confidence with that, I decided just to have a sharp knife on hand, and I'm going to slice this basically as thin as I can.
And when he means as thin as you can, you really need to get it as thin as you can. Because this raw ginger, even though we're going to candy it, we're going to cook it down, after you eat it, it's going to have that hot ginger flavor to it.
It's going to be spicy. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite fibrous. When I read this recipe, I really don't agree with it. There are a number of things that I would do differently to kind of get rid of that hot ginger flavor to it. I would first blanch the ginger to kind of cook it a little bit, to kind of get rid of that hot rawness. Luckily for us, we also have a dehydrator. So I would dehydrate it. That way it's dehydrated for upwards of 24 hours to kind of help continue to get that raw ginger out of there without diluting the sweetness of it. But, you know, we're just guys here passing and following directions like the rest of you, so.
Maybe we could use younger ginger, then it won't be so spicy.
Yeah, you're right. Young ginger would be nice too. And you wouldn't have to peel young ginger too. So have that nice kind of like lightish, whitish pink color to it.
Very good suggestion. So I've got thin slices. Now I'm going to take my slices and just do a matchstick julienne. And I realize now I've cut these a little too short. They're about twice the length in our recipe and what we'll be serving. But the point is to get, you know, tiny matchsticks. Like a true julienne is just like very small. Batonnet, is that?
No, julienne is 1/8 by 1/8 by 2 inches.
I don't remember all my French names. Who cares? Okay. So, exactly. Very small and skinny. Those are going into a pot. We're making a simple syrup in a pot with the ginger inside. If you decide to dehydrate them, we recommend it if you want to make them, if you want to have a little more subtle flavor, and that might help also to get them the crispy finish that we're looking for.
You don't have to dehydrate it. Your oven can go as low as like 125 or 150. You can use that as a dehydrating process.
Okay,
So
so
put it on like a non-slip baking sheet, and then put it on there too. Otherwise, if you put it on just on a cookie sheet or a baking sheet, it'll stick.
Then if you put it in the oven, how long do you do it though? For the 125?
I would say 6 hours.
Okay.
Because I don't think you really want to have it in there for anything longer than that. Luckily, a dehydrator is a little more controlled. Where most ovens, you know, after a while, you'll have some certain hot spots to it, where some of it's going to burn, some of it's not going to burn. So I would say no more than 6 hours in an oven that low on temp.
okay, I've got some ice cream melting here, so I'm going to tell you real quick about the ginger. This came from a pot. Inside the pot was sugar and water. It went about 10 minutes just till it was tender, and then we took it out and placed it on a separate container to cool down a little bit. Once the ginger starts to cool down and becomes like kind of tacky, sticky, but not hot to the touch, we're going to toss it up in sugar at that point. Okay, so, yeah, so pull down slightly. We're gonna kind of completely, fully coat it in sugar and just toss it so that it coats the sugar. And because it's still warm and tacky, you're gonna let that rest a few more minutes to dry out, maybe a good 10, 20 minutes. I'm not sure exactly what's recommended in the packet. But after it's fully rested, you should have that candied ginger. You should hear it when it falls on the plate. You know, it should be crispy, crackly, okay?
You just want to make sure that that you separate them as you're kind of cooling them and once after you toss them. Otherwise, once that sugar and that syrup is fully hardened, you have a giant clump and you don't want to sit there and try to peel it apart.
Okay, so I've got another plate ready to go here. We're going to take our waffle. In this case, we thought for dessert that was kind of a lot. So we'll be doing a half of one of these for y'all. I'm curious to see what the kitchen comes up with as far as plating, but this is how we're going to do it. So we're going to put the waffle down first. Let's see what it suggests. Forgive me. Okay.
Freestyle it, John.
Okay. We're going
Just
freestyle.
just like our wonderful guests are going to be doing at home.
Exactly.
Freestyle.
We've got our glazed grilled peaches. We're going to set those around and about so you can see them so they're not buried. We're going to take a couple scoops of ice cream and go right onto the still warm waffles. Okay. We're going to take a little bit of our balsamic, our boozy balsamic, and glaze around here. Maybe just playing around with some different things you could do on a dark sauce and a white plate.
That fig balsamic you guys also made first course would still go very well with something like this too.
Make sure I'm not
Where did you
missing
put the
anything.
peaches?
The peaches I've just kind of set around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're just about on the plate as opposed to, you know, stacked up with the ice cream. I'm going to put just a couple pieces because it's very strong. You might not see a huge handful of the ginger. We're going to go a little bit of toasted sliced almonds. And I think it suggests mint. We upped the game a little bit. We got some nice pretty little micro mint leaves here. And we're just going to set those off here and there. And it should look something like that.
Another really nice substitute that I think would be better than sliced almonds like that is if you were to do candied pecans.
What?
Candied pecans.
Right. Right. In this case, we toasted them just to get the toasted, another dynamic of the toasted nut, where the candy has already been done to the ginger. So we found it redundant to candy the nuts as well.
Yeah.
Buy that at Trader Joe's.
Thank you. The orchids are actually edible. So.
Well, these specific ones are anyways.
Just a couple flowers in my hat. Are there any other questions about the dessert or?
I wonder